What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Pens and Tea. My name is Carrie, and today you can still see my tripod. Yeah, I'm still rocking and rolling with the old one that is half broken because my new one I don't really like. But that is not the subject of today's video. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about the nibs on Sailor versus the nibs on Platinum. This was requested in my last video I did as a nib comparison between the Pilot nibs. Wait, where do I have that? Oh yeah, it's inked up. Silly goose. Between Pilot nibs, so I had my 74, I've got the A23, I've got a whole bunch between Pilot and Platinum. No, Pilot and Sailor. But I compared the Sailor a little bit to the Platinum. So people were like, hey, why don't you make a video out of that? And I was like, hey, that sounds like a great idea. So for those who commented, thank you. And here she is. So much like the last video, I'm not talking at all whatsoever about the pens themselves. It is solely the nib. So I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what the build quality is. I don't care about anything in this video. Simply the nibs. And I mean, really, I wouldn't even say like the feeds all that much either, because to be honest, they're both wet enough. Spoiler. But they do both have plastic feeds, so it's not like one's ebonite and one isn't. Obviously, they're differently shaped, but they both have plastic feeds. So for today, the pens that you're looking at is the Sailor Pro Gear. This is the like mocha finish, cafe finish. There's brown finish. There's so many different names for that pen. The Platinum 3776 in chartreuse blue. However you want to put the fancy accents onto that. I will say right off the bat, this does have a medium fine nib, and this is a fine nib, but they're pretty darn similar, so not a whole lot of difference there. Obviously, again, they look different, but really what I want to talk about in this video is in general between the Pro Gears, Pro Gear Mini, 1911s, and any of the Platinum Century models, because that's specifically what I'm talking about. These are the models and the nibs that I will specifically be talking about. Sailor does make a compass. Platinum, of course, has like a preppy and a whole bunch of different nib styles. But I'm pretty much just talking about their gold nib options. Sailor also has a whole bunch of specialty nibs. I'm not going to be talking about those, although I do have a review of many of them, like the Zoom, for example. So check that out on my channel if you want. They both have music nib options that you can check out as well. But primarily, I'm going to be focusing on the main ones that everyone can have access to worldwide, which is extra fine up until broad. I don't know if Sailor has it, but I know for sure that Platinum also has an extra fine option. I've never used it, and to be honest, I have no desire to. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So, all of those caveats out of the way, let's get into it. So, I will show you writing samples, but generally speaking, Sailor tends to be a little bit of a smoother writing experience than Platinum. Platinum does have a bit of a toothier feel to it. It's not necessarily scratchy. It's just that you do get more feedback. And with Sailor, you get a little bit less. And I say a little bit because the finer you go with your nibs, the more that you're willing, or the more that you're going to have feedback. What I will say is that between the fine nib on the Sailor, a fine nib on a Platinum, they do write pretty close to each other with the actual width of the line on the paper. Again, you'll see the writing sample in a moment. But when you start to get to mediums and broads, I would give the edge slightly to Sailor for the medium, staying truer to what's known as a Japanese medium, meaning it's a little bit of a finer line when you compare it to a European fine, so something with like a Yovo nib or a Bach. That said, they're pretty close, and once you get into broad, and especially above, there's zero difference. It's pretty much the same as any European at that point. Where Japanese pens in general tend to shine is with their fines and extra fines that are much finer than, how many times am I going to say the word fine in this video? That are much finer than their European counterparts, and that's just because of their natural writing style. They have to be, and that's why some people prefer Japanese pens, some people prefer European pens. I don't really have a preference, although I will say like my collection is pretty well split because I think there's a time and a place for both. The Platinum Fine, I believe, is the finest nib that I own. For the purposes of the writing portion, I am going to dip them into Mont Blanc Toffee Brown because neither of these are inked up, because I knew that I'd be touching the back of the feeds in this video. But I do want to do a writing sample for you. Now, I will say they're going to be slightly wetter than normal in this just because they are going to be dipped. But I will assure you that it doesn't really matter for A, this discussion, and B, they're both sufficiently wet pens. Like, they're not like, holy smokes, you know, gonna call 911 to get the fire department here kind of wet. But they're definitely not dry writers. Sailor, in all of the ones that I've ever used for Sailor, I would say tends to be a little bit wetter than the Platinum, but I have never had a problem with Platinum, and I've used, 8 Platinums, like versions, because I've used the billion, like I've used a couple of celluloids. I used to own like 3 or 4 more. This is now the only one I own, and ironically enough, this is the only one I own. But I've used a billion Sailors as well. So I definitely know what to expect with them. So let's open up this guy, and let's start with the Sailor. Just do a quick dip here. Slightly out of view, and let's, oops, wrong way. Zoom in a little here. Now, this one happens to be 21 karat. The Platinum is 14, but that really does not matter. You get a little bit of bounce with the Sailor. It's not quite as stiff as the Platinum, and it's definitely not a flex nib. Neither of them are, but it is a little softer, and it's definitely smoother. You do feel the nib on the page, but you don't have quite as much resistance as you do with the Platinum. And if I bring it to the mic a little bit, you know, you can definitely hear it, but it's very, very pleasant. Now, I will say that this specific nib has been tuned because I bought this secondhand. And when it got to me, it was not very pleasant. It was scratchy, tines were slightly misaligned, and I just didn't have a good time with it. So I did have this one tuned, but the like 6, 7, 8 others that I've used have not been tuned, and they were all pretty much the exact same as this. So now we're going to ink up the Platinum. So you can see that the Platinum Century is a slightly finer line, but again, this is a medium fine and this is a fine. So, but either like with the fine or medium or anything, the writing sample is pretty much the same. So you do have a slight give, certainly not as much on the Sailor as the Sailor, and you do have a little bit more resistance than the Sailor. And if I bring it up, you can kind of hear, at least I hope you can. I won't know until I go to edit this. I hope you can hear that it isn't quite as glassy as the Sailor. It's not scratchy in the sense that like the tines are perfectly aligned, but you do certainly have more feedback. And that is something that is known with Platinum on their finer nibs. So between the two, in general, you're going to have a smoother writing experience with Sailor, and you're going to have a more feedbacky writing experience with Platinum. I really enjoy them both. I think there's a different time and place for them. Sorry about the sniff. Didn't realize I was doing it until after. I tend to use the Platinum when I want something that is really fine, because like I said, this is finer than anything that I own. When I want something that's really fine, gives me a very tactile feeling while I'm writing. This is very similar to like a graphite pencil, especially like a sharp graphite pencil. Whereas the Sailor is smoother than that. So if I'm sort of vibing that feel of I want that texture, then I go with the Platinum, which is why this pen has been in my collection, oh gosh, 6 or 7 years. Like it was the first gold nib I got. I've had it for so long. And I mean, I haven't sold it, so that says something. I've had the Sailor in my collection now for a few years. And like I said, I do tend to have this one inked up a little bit more than the Platinum. Because I will use this instead of the Platinum if I want a finer line, but I don't want that tactile feel. Most of my pens, if you've watched a lot of my videos, you're aware that I prefer pens that do write like fire hoses, and neither of these do. So something to be aware of. But I mean, that's the general gist for these two pens. Nothing mind-blowing, to be honest, about either. There isn't one that I would say is like 100% of the time I recommend pen A. I never recommend pen B to people. I recommend them both. I just need to know what you're after. I would say in general, the Sailor is probably more friendly, but less personality than the Platinum. I'll say that. But again, I'm not talking about any of their specialty nibs or anything like that. Just their baseline, fine to broads. If you've never used either of these pens before and want a recommendation, I would want to know what you're already using. If you're used to Japanese pens, then I would say go with the Platinum. Because you'll never have a pen that writes like that. But if you're primarily like a European pen person, then I would say go for a Sailor first, because it's a smoother transition than if you were to jump right to a Platinum. Now, if you don't like Sailor or you don't like the look of Sailor, then I would recommend getting like a medium nib on a Platinum rather than a fine, because a lot of the texture and that personality I was talking about is on the fine, and it loses a little bit of that with the medium, but it's still there. So that's overall the primary differences. There's so much more that I could get into if I wanted to get nitpicky, but I don't think that, this video really serves that purpose. So that's in general my thoughts. Let me know in the comment section down below if you agree, disagree, why not. Do you have a preference? Do you have both? Just let me know, and let others know as well, so that it's not just one opinion when you're looking to get a pen. So guys, thank you for watching. I appreciate you. Hit that like button if you liked it. Hit the subscribe if you want to see more every Monday and Friday, and the occasional rando on Tuesday. Check out the Patreon if you want to help support what I do here. And as always, if you're still watching this far in, I thank you very, very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to thank all of my VIP and above patrons. This was filmed May 2nd, so if you don't see your name and you've just started supporting me, don't worry. It will appear as soon as I can update it. So we have Mr. Daniel Roddy, we have Elizabeth, Glenn Kelly, Joan Worthman, Brian Hunter, Aaron C., Luna Wolf Games, Bobby A. Bailey, Bass, Wayley Chang, Brian Law, Lucas Bell, Aubrey Madcore, Marissa Calvo, Eric Lineman, Jessica Chow, Stephen Baldwin, Carol Lowry, Michael Simon, Sean Sturdy, Catherine Molina, Robert Myers, Bianca Andrews, Bill Pemberton, Karen Epstein, Gretchen Peters, Subiwan Kenobi, which is just the best name. She's actually presidential tier, Bianca Andrews, digitaltent.tech, and McCall Bennett Lawrence. Thank you all, regardless of the tier you choose. You will never know how much it actually means to me that you support me, my content, and what I do here.